Today we are going to talk about Spring Boot. We have heard a lot of things in the keynote about Boot, how to improve the developer experience with that. How many of you is using Spring right now, the Spring framework as itself? Great. How many people is using Spring Boot in production? Oh, not many, okay. In this session, I'm going to talk the first minutes about Spring and Spring Boot in general, and after that, I will start coding. So let's get started. Well, my name is Eddú Meléndez. I am a Java software engineer. I am from Peru. I am also an Spring open source contributor, like Archelian Qt and many Spring projects. I have been playing with a Spring portfolio. And I also built my Batis Spring Boot starter. Okay, I am also a blogger. So the first thing I want to talk is about developer experience. As we know, we are in a world which is consumed by software. Software is everywhere. Every business is built using software. And this is impacting our daily life. Like, for example, Uber, Netflix. But we can say that programming is changing the world. And we as developers need tools, powerful tools. How many of you feel good when are developing applications? Do you feel good? Or do you have to do many things and you are worried about that? You don't like it? Using Spring Boot, we are going to improve our developer experience. So, as we know, as we saw in the keynote, this is the Spring ecosystem. Everything is under the Spring Framework core, and there are several projects around it for Spring Web Services, Spring Integration, Security, Data, Spring Batch, Social. And I remember when I started using Spring, I was using the version 2.5, and it was really interesting. I just have to create an XML file and keep my class, and then start injecting all the things that I need. This is a Spring Framework. We have seen all the modules, and Spring Framework and the ecosystem provide all the ingredients that we need as a developer. So this is Spring Boot. Who likes cakes? Everyone, right? If you like cake, so you are going to enjoy with Spring Boot. So, but what is a Spring Boot? Oh, sorry. Do you remember this? Or who is using Spring with XML now? Okay, that's okay. But this is the old-fashioned way to configure Spring nowadays. In version 3, everything can be configured through Java config. You can use Bing annotation and configuration, auto-wired. Who is using Spring with annotations? Cool. So when Spring provides Java configuration, there was a problem when we start writing applications because we need many configurations. There is someone who remember or who can tell me all the steps to set up Spring Data, for example? It's very usual to, I don't know, but maybe it's usual to open another project, copy the configuration, and then copy all the dependencies to my current project and try it, and maybe an error is produced because it's not well configured. So in Spring Boot, if we want to configure one data source, we have seen the XML way, the Java configuration way, and in Spring Boot, all you have to do is set up all the properties. But why Spring Boot? Because it's a provide convention over configuration. All the Spring team has provided the right configuration for, I can say, almost all the projects. They also provide dependency management. Who is happy dealing with dependencies? No one, right? Sometimes you have to choose, or you have to find the right version in order to keep your application running. It provides auto configuration. You just need to tell Spring Boot, I want to use web, JPA, and everything is going to be configured by itself, by Spring Boot. You don't need to write code for that. That's the reason why our developer experience is going to improve. And in the demo, during the demo, we are going to see this. Starter dependencies. As I said, dealing with dependencies is hard, and the Spring Boot team provide the right dependencies for our applications. And there are also no functional requirements. Sometimes it's not considered in applications, but with the Spring Boot, it's really easy. And we are going to see now. The first place to start is this web, start.spring.io. So just save in your favorites, please. And this website has been built with Spring Boot. It's an open source project. You can download and see all the configurations, all the code. Maybe you are very familiar with this group artifact ID for the build tools, like Maven or Grail. You can choose the package, jar or war. Who is deploying with jars or fat jars? 2, 3, 4, okay. Also, you can choose the Java version, okay. Spring Boot can run over Java 1.6, so anyone is using Java 6, 7, 8? Oh, great, okay. And also you can choose the language. It's not only Java, you can run over Ruby or Kotlin. Kotlin was added a few months ago. And here you can tell which projects you want to use. But there are other ways to start with Spring Boot. It doesn't matter where you are, even if you are using just your terminal, you can set cure start. And here you are going to see again all the ways you can, if you want to use, Grail project or Maven build. By default is Maven project. All the dependencies, it's very well designed. So, and here you can find some examples to download. So there are no excuses to start with the Spring Boot. And another thing is with Spring CLI. Okay. For example, I can start very quickly writing this code. I'm going to say REST controller class greeting controller F5. Anyone using the last version of Spring 4.3? Okay, there are new annotations like get mapping. Example, and here, let's say, welcome to SpringOne. Spring. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Oh, yep, thank you. And now I have my application running over a Tomcat. So we can state here, and it's that. Welcome to SpringOne. Yeah, Spring Boot by itself, it depends on, it's run over an embedded Tomcat, but you can configure it also with Under 2 and Jetty. Sorry? There are two ways to run Spring Boot applications. You can run just the jar as a jar file, or you can also build the WAR file and then put in another server, Tomcat or JBoss or whatever you want. Oh, I'm gonna talk about that in a few minutes. Maybe that's gonna be the best time. So as you can see, there are different ways to start through the website, through the command line too. But also you can start with your IDE. And we are going to see a same interface. I will use, oh sorry, intro to boot. I'm going to keep the rest as a default. And we are going to use the last version of Spring Boot. It was delivered the last week, so it's hot. I'm going to tell, I want web and JPA. Actuator provides production-ready features. We are going to see this later. Okay. As you can see, this is pointing to the Start Spring EO site. I forgot. Okay. So, few things that we have to check before to start coding is that the site is going to provide a MAYIM project with everything just to start. As you can see, there is a jar, and there is a parent, which will bring all the things that the Spring needs, like all the dependencies, all the plugins that already need, Spring Boot already need. And as you can see, I choose web and JPA. And you cannot find, for example, a Spring MVC or an embedded Tomcat dependency here. Because with these starters, Spring provides all the dependencies. If I want to dip into, sorry. For example, this is the starter, and the starter set is gonna use Hibernate Core, JDBC, AOP, Hibernate Entity Manager. And there is also a test dependency. And this section is the Spring Boot MAYIM plugin, which provides more features to work with the Spring Boot. And there is just one class here. I'm going to rename this. Okay, and the only thing that we need to run this application is this annotation, Spring Boot application, which have, well, it's a configuration. It has a configuration annotation and the component scan, which will load all the configurations in the same package and packages under this. And this annotation, the enable and the configuration, is who does the trick, who enable all this stuff, all these auto configurations. I'm going to show you this. Here we can see all the configurations that Spring provides. AOP, Rabbit, batch, caching, data, Cassandra, Couchbase, and many others Spring data projects. There are also JDBC, Mail, Flyway, Liquibase. So we already have JPA. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an entity. Okay, I will use ID annotation, and here generated value strategy is auto. Okay, and here I'm going to create my setter and getters. Constructor. I am also going to build one constructor to save the name and one empty constructor because it's required by JPA. Anyone using Spring Data? JPA? Okay, few. So, speaker, repository. This should be an interface. And I'm going to start JPA, repository, speaker, and long. Okay. Well, this interface provides several methods, like a find all, count, save. This is the abstraction to work with JPA. Now I am going to populate the, oh, sorry, I forgot to import the H2 database. As you can see, I have not set up any version. Sorry. Any version because, as I said, Springboard provides the right version by default. And now I am going to use one bean command line runner, so load speakers. Arcs. I need the dependency here, private speaker repository. Okay. I don't need to say auto wire here because in the last release of Spring in 4.3, Spring injects by default in any configuration all the dependencies that is required by the class. So here of speaker. Okay, I'm going for the web, new speaker. Sorry, just low. Okay. Speaker. So I'm going to inject save. .com. Okay. As you can see, I have not write any configuration. I just writing code to deliver what my demo. And I also need a speaker. Sorry, can you repeat? Oh, no, it's not needed. Spring Boot by itself recognize all the repositories.
Based on class name?
No, it's not. It's not by the name of the class. It's by the interface, because I am using JPL repository. So Spring Boot we're looking for in my class, but all the classes that are extended by this interface and will be loaded. So here, sorry, first controller. And the first thing to do is speaker repository. I just need to inject through the constructor, and then list of speakers. So here I can say return is repository final. So now I am going to run my application. As you can see, there are no configuration, and Spring Boot is well integrated with my IDE. So you have the option Spring Boot app. Okay, it's running. So as you can see, my service has been delivered. There are no configuration. I just put all my focus in write this application. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to do is use some properties. Sometimes we need to set up another values in our projects. For example, here I want to see all the SQL that Hibernate is doing when hit the database. So I'm going to tell true. I'm going to restart my app. If you are using a Spring Tool Suite, all your projects that are using a Spring Boot are going to be loaded here. So I can run again. And as you can see too, my project is with the label boot. So it has a start. And here you can see that just using one property, I can show my SQLs, my sentences. But what happens if I want to use my own properties? For example, sorry. Let's say I have a conference properties. And usually when you want to use, or when you want to inject properties in Spring, you are using this annotation, okay? But with the Spring Boot, this has been improved. And I think that is very useful, very useful. Configuration properties. And I can set the prefix, which is going to be conference. For example, I'm going to put name and location. And there is a warning there. And this suggests me that I can add another dependency, which is the configuration processor. And now, this dependency is going to allow me to use my properties provided by this class, by this new class. For example, I have now conference name and conference location. Conference name, SpringOne platform. And the conference location is Ariotel, Las Vegas. I will write something similar. But here, just to enable these properties, I have to use another dependency, enable configuration properties, and I'm going to tell I want to enable conference properties class. I'm going to inject it here, private conference properties. And I'm going to sort. I'm going to print. Oh, sorry. Get name and get location. Okay, I'm going to restart the app. And here you can see all the keys that I have populated in the application properties. By default, Spring Boot is going to use embedded Tomcat, as I said. Okay. Now I am going to use another starter, because sometimes we want to build web applications. And this time, I'm going to use Timeleaf. And here I'm going to cheat a little bit, because I don't want to write any code for this. This is a simple Timeleaf HTML. And by default, Spring Boot, it has a lot of default values. And here is Spring is going to read this folder, templates, and load the speaker HTML file. But it needs one configuration. So speaker controller. I'm going to annotate with controller stuff. I don't know what happened there. And here, again, so public get mapping. I'm going to tell speakers speakers here. Speakers. Fine. Oh. Now I'm going to render this new controller, but with Timeleaf. As you can see, Spring Boot is not only using Spring projects, it also encourages developers to use another tools that are well integrated with Spring. So, and now it's rendered with using my HTML file and Timeleaf. But what about if I want to use the last version of Timeleaf or any other framework or library? It's really really easy to override these properties. And in this version, in 1.4, Spring Boot provides auto configuration for Timeleaf 2 and Timeleaf 3. So I just only have to do this. 301 release. Timeleaf layout version. Version 6.01. I'm going to verify here. Oh, sorry. Dialect. Oh, it's not working. Sorry. Oh, let me check. No, there is no typo. Oh, sorry. Thank you. And now it's okay. Thank you. As you can see, it's very easy to override these properties, but you can take care about this because you can break the compatibility between this new dependency with Spring Boot. The Spring Boot team, it has working very hard on this. All the time they are trying to provide the last version of these technologies. So let's restart again. Now I am using a new version of Timeleaf at this time. It's still working with this new dependency. But now, if we are using Timeleaf, we want to modify this HTML, we have to set up some stuff, some properties, or we can add another dependency, which is devtools. And here, optional true. This is just for development purpose. And with this dependency, we are going to enable some stuff. Like, for example, we are using H2 database, an embedded database. So we are going to enable with this dependency another endpoint. And I can dip into the database now. I just add the dependency. And now H2 database endpoint is enabled. As you can see, the table is right there. And the data is also there. So this is enabled by this dependency. But what about my web page? Anyone has heard about live reload? Cool. Some of you. Okay. With this Chrome extension, I'm going to connect to my application through a WebSocket, because with this dependency, devtools, my application is going to expose a WebSocket server. So any change that I will do in my app is going to be refreshed in this application. I am connected right now. Yes, at the same time. Oh, come on. And for example, here, speakers, what platform? And as you can see, it has been reloaded. I have not to do anything. And what happened, this also improves your experience, because when we are developing new sites, we are all the time modifying this kind of stuff. So we need to prototype very quickly and avoid to restart the application every time. But another thing that Spring Boot devtools does is, for example, if I modify my Java file, I was to a space. My application has been reloaded. This is because Spring Boot works with class loaders. So any change that I will do in my classes, in my application, it will be reloaded. But be careful, because if you are going to add another dependency, this is not going to work, because in the first time you run, all the classes has been loaded, so the new dependency is not there yet until you refresh all your stuff. Okay. We have also talked a little bit about production-ready features, and there was a question about actuator, what it is. So what if we are going to deploy in production and we want metrics, a health status of my application, or I want to expose all the configuration that is already there? I think that who is doing this stuff without a Spring Boot? Who expose metrics, health status? Okay, 2. But with the Spring Boot, you just need one dependency, and your application will expose all this stuff. As you can see, I just adding some configuration, some dependencies, and all this stuff is provided by boot, but okay, has been refreshed. So now I have a new endpoint that has been provided by Spring Boot, by this new dependency. Here we can see all my environment properties. For example, it's loading the application properties that is inside of my project, the stuff that I have there. And this stuff is provided by devtools. As you can see, it says Spring Boot H2 console enable true, and Timeleaf caching false. There are other stuff, but we are using this right now. What about my health status? I want to know how my application is running and if their dependencies are okay. In this case, we are using a database, a data source. So it also said that the database is H2 and is running. And I also have information about my disk space, which is very useful. There are other endpoints, like config props. I can see here all the configuration properties that are in my project. There are metrics. Spring Boot provides metrics about out of the box. So this is awesome if we are going to deploy in production. We just need to add this dependency. But what if I want to add another health status? I want to customize this stuff. For example, I'm going to add a health indicator. For example, SpringOne health indicator. Health. Maybe I want to add some other stuff, like one message. SpringOne is running. Okay, maybe it's just an example. So sorry. Let me see. I'm going to reload this because I have added a new dependency. So if we are in the health endpoint, we are going to see this new key, which is SpringOne. This key is my method name, but without the health indicator. Okay. It's not required to name like this, but if you prefer to write something like the SpringOne health indicator, Springboard will delete this suffix. So now, what if I want to add security to my application? Again, it's really easy. You don't have to deep in all this configuration. I'm looking for dependencies. Yes, now. I'm going to reload this. And by default, adding this new dependency, your application is using security. If I want to check the speakers page, it's going to ask me about my user and password. And by default, the username is user, and the password is generated and provided in your log. So I am already there. But what if I want to customize? I don't want to enter in each server and pick the password. Security config. I don't know what's happening with that configuration. Instance global. Init. Authentication. My username is going to be boot. And my password, boot2, it's not very secure, but enroll user. I'm going to add another one. I don't know, maybe cloud. User and admin. So let's see. Okay, now it's required. What if I write boot and boot here? I am inside of my application again. And here you can see that in the first time I showed the health endpoint, you can see, you could see more information about it. But once you define some roles, Springboard will take care about this, and you, as a user, you are only able to see the status, but not to see all the other stuff, because if I expose my database status or my disk space, it provides too much information to other sites. So this is just will show up to that mean. For example, I'm going to health. Oh, sorry. Cloud. I am already logged as admin, and I am able to see all this stuff again. Okay. So this is not the only way to run your application. You have other stuff like the command line tool. For example, this is S1P intro. Yep. You can use Maven. Because as I showed at the beginning, you have already a Spring Boot Maven plugin. So if you are using Maven or Grail, who is using Grail? No, nowadays? Few? Okay. Spring loves these technologies, and it doesn't matter if you are using Maven or Grail. They provide plugins for that. And I think that there is, and there are also an integration. Someone in the community, I think, that provide this. As you can see, it's running again using my Maven plugin. But now I want to deliver this to production. What I need to do? I'm going to package my project. Okay. So here you can see the ESP1 demo jar, and another one which is renamed as an original. What does it mean? The first one, oh, sorry, the last one is the jar with just your classes, the classes that you have written. But this jar, it's called fat jar because there are jars inside this jar. My Tomcat is embedded there too. So I just need to run this command. I don't need any application server, as you can see. It's a jar, so you cannot deploy it in another server. Okay, it's running again. Sorry. So what if I want to use another embedded server? As I said at the beginning, by default, it's using Tomcat, but you can use Under2 or Yeti. Oh, by the way, Springboard is using the last version of Tomcat, 8.5.4. So it's cool because there are many features in these versions. And I think that there are another talk about Tomcat in this same route. So if I want to use another embedded server, I just need to exclude here. Good. And I will use under2. Springboard starter under2. Ah, sorry, I am excluding here. Yep. And I will add the under2 server. Just like this. And just reload. And as you can see here, under2 has been started in the same port, 8080. Just to verify that this my application running, everything is running okay. So the Springboard team has done a nice work with that, supporting all these embedded Oh, sure. There is a lot of abstraction here. So what if I want to change the server port? I just need to use my application port and set, for example, 8082. Let's reload. $8082. Just to make sure about this, $8082. Oh, yeah. Okay, the question is, how can I use another application property file? Yeah. You can use profiles with Spring. So Spring itself, without Spring Boot, provides profiles. So you can reuse all this stuff here in Spring Boot. But what if I want to, this is in my machine, but what if I want to deliver this jar and deploy it in another server? With another properties. I'm going to copy the jar file and put it here. And I already have, sorry. And I already have this application YAML, okay? And my jar is inside. Okay, my jar and this new file is there. So the value is now server port 8083. Just you can set up new properties using an application YAML and override all the properties that are inside of your jar. Here is 8083. So, yeah, just to recap, we have seen Spring Boot in action. We don't need any configuration. All this stuff is dealt with the Spring Boot itself. It provides a dependency management. So just enjoy with the last version of the third-party dependencies and Spring project itself. You can override the properties, the versions, and you can use the last stuff. Sometimes I know that companies refuse to upgrade, and they prefer to keep the same stuff working on your application. But you can also downgrade overriding the property. You can use Spring Boot as a jar, but there are another option, and you can build a war. Okay, there is not too much time to do this, but Spring Boot provides a very well documentation. So, or if you want to talk about that later, we can catch up. It also provides actuator with a lot of metrics. You can override them. You can add more configuration to this actuator stuff. Logging. You can set up using the application properties. Just look for the keys, and you can override that configuration too. Oh, maybe we can talk about that later. Okay, just to finish, just enjoy with the Spring Boot. It provides a really nice developer experience. As you have seen, I have not configured anything. I just add the dependency and write code, because it's that matter, my application. Thank you so much.